Prospect House Media.
And now, prepare yourself for the only weekly podcast you won't want to miss. Welcome to the Ameritocracy Show with Troy Edgar, live from our studios in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C.
Hey everybody, I am Troy Edgar and welcome to the Ameritocracy Show. Thank you for tuning in and checking it out. It is greatly appreciated. This podcast examines the conditions for personal and professional growth and opportunity across America. This week, I met with Mike Burkenbine, CEO of the Becket Film Fund at the Ameritocracy L.A. studios. Mike had recently returned from the Cannes Film Festival in France, and we had a great discussion about his career and the focus at the Becket Film Fund. Mike is an expert at evaluating market trends, financial projections, demographics, and economic conditions, and he had started his career helping developers optimize their investment strategies. He's been involved with the entertainment industry since the early 1990s. While working at Nielsen, he had developed an analytics platform to enable studios to evaluate and optimize investments in new movies. This tool has been adopted by most of the major studios, including Disney, Warner Brothers, and Sony Pictures. Now, leading the Becket Film Fund, Mike explains the industry's triple conundrum of film production, and he emphasizes to people interested in going into the film industry the importance of understanding what you can offer and what the industry needs. I hope you enjoy. Good morning, Mike. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's been a while. You and I had a lot of times back in our days in USC, and it's so good getting back together.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I know you've had a busy schedule. I'm going to ask you a little bit here, but I know you've just been to the Cannes Festival in France, and
Right.
How did that go? And you definitely, you look like you got the Cannes a tan going there, so you might have been by the water a little bit, huh?
I was. I spent a week or so in Cognac and Bordeaux, sampling wine and cognac and that sort of thing, and drinking good food and eating foie gras and stuff that's illegal here in California to have. And then I went to Cannes, which is basically has a Mediterranean climate like Southern California. So there's a cool breeze off of the Mediterranean and all that. And so we were about a half a mile from the red carpet and that sort of thing. But actually at the Marché du Film, which is the film market there where the business people meet and they buy and sell movies and look for distribution and funding and try to get actors and actresses attached and that kind of stuff. And then the festival is sort of a separate kind of thing where they're screening movies.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it definitely gets a lot of fanfare, the whole event. I follow you on social media too. I saw that you got to speak at a couple panels there.
Yes.
That's got to be a big deal for your industry.
Yeah, it was Sunday morning, and so I wondered if anybody would show up because Saturday night was the big red carpet, and so I didn't know whether anybody was going to be there.
Right.
But it was about 3/4 of the way full, and it was great. We were talking about indigenous film projects. Okay. Either where the indigenous people were the writers, the directors, the actors, and that sort of thing, and how to finance them. So I spent most of the time talking about financing films and how that functions, and for people who are wanting to learn that, and other people that are indigenous that wanted to, bring their talents forward, whether it's writing, directing, producing, acting, and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So you and I did start at USC, and I'm going to ask you in a few minutes to talk a little bit about your background. But what I remember back in our earlier days, that was in the MBA program. You definitely had a little bit of consumer products, a little bit of entertainment, but you had come across kind of a Nielsen's ratings data analytics. Mm-hmm. And so I thought that the listeners, the audience would be really interested in your story because, we're going to talk a lot today about film and the film industry, but I think kind of based into where you've started and your background, I also kind of wanted to give the listeners a perspective of, coming into something with an expertise, even if it's something that an industry or an area of interest that like film or entertainment, anything like that. But, everybody has a spot in that industry, and it's not just the talent side. You have a Becket Film Fund that basically goes out and helps locate and identify movies and puts the triple conundrum together. And I'll have you talk about that in a little bit. But I was hoping that from the perspective today, and then lastly, I think just really, getting your view and summary of the industry, and maybe something you'd leave with some of the people that are watching that might be interested in doing this. Starting with that, Mike, if you wouldn't mind, I'm just going to turn this over to you a little bit, just maybe a little bit of your origin and kind of leading up into, where you're at today, and then we'll go from there into the Becket Film Fund.
Okay, that sounds great. So in school, in undergrad, back in North Carolina, I'm really good at math, and I really like demographics and what people are doing and why people. I'm a why person. I would ask, why do these people buy this or go here or do this or not do this? And so those things were really interesting to me. And so right out of school, I did feasibility and absorption analysis for real estate developers. So I built these big decks that developers like Kaufman and Broad and those sorts of people would take to banks and get loans to do master plan communities or different neighborhoods and that sort of thing. And it takes demographics. You've got to know who would be buying these homes if you're talking about residential, how much they're willing to pay, how big the houses need to be. Are they what they call move up, meaning they're in maybe a smaller house, and now they need a bigger house with a second story where the kids can go and get away from the parents or vice versa. Or they're moved down, so they're retiring. And so these are all demographics. They're based on, economics, income, location, amenities, and that sort of thing. And I did that for a while, and then the real estate market in Southern California crashed and nobody was building houses. So then I went to work for Nielsen on the research side. So the research is based on scanner data. So when you go to the grocery store and you buy something, every single transaction from every single cash register, from every single store, from every single chain for all of drug, all of mass, all of convenience, a bunch of others, those transactions are captured. And then Nielsen sells those to the big CPG companies like Kellogg's and Procter & Gamble and Budweiser and those sorts. And the marketing people can tell how their marketing programs are going. So, for example, if you drop an ad in Los Angeles for Bud Light, then can you see the sales go up or not? Or if you drop the price for Nestle, Butterfinger BBs or whatever, then did you make more money? Sales went up, but your margin went down, so you have to figure out whether that worked. And so there are these brand managers are evaluated on that. And so then while I was there, I worked at Kellogg's in between those two, and I used demographics to conceptualize Cheez-It Hot and Spicy, which is still being sold. So I was about 24 at the time. But I used demographics. So what's going on in the marketplace? Well, Taco Bell was opening 10 new stores, 10 new restaurants like a day or some crazy number, and people were going crazy over Mexican food. And I thought, well, Cheez-It's the number one cheese cracker in the world. Why don't we put Mexican spices in it? And so I pitched that to corporate, and then a food scientist put that together, and it took off, and it's still being sold today. Wow. And then Nielsen hired me themselves to help with marketing research, and I went to work for Nestle. And again, they were trying to figure out how to increase the sales of the chocolate line. Their pet care is a bigger revenue stream for Nestle, believe it or not, than chocolate. But they were trying to do that. And so the answer was portion control. So people don't want to eat a whole candy bar necessarily or close it up, and it was sort of messy. So M&Ms sell well. So they thought, well, what if we took, Butterfingers and made them into little bite-sized pieces? And so I did all the research, the projections and the demographics to try to figure out what would go on with that, who would buy them, how much are they willing to pay, what parts of the country would they sell. And so we rolled out Butterfinger BBs and Bunch of Crunch, which were pieces, and I did that for a while. And then being a function guy versus an industry guy, so now I've been in several industries. My boss said we needed more revenue, and we tried to figure out some way to get revenue off of the scanner data. So every transaction's captured, but we needed to have clients to buy the data. And we figured out what was created in Southern California that had a UPC code on it that we weren't selling to anybody. And the answer was home entertainment. And so I built a little mini database, and I got a meeting with the head of worldwide research for Disney Home Entertainment and pitched it to them, and it said, hey, I can show you what the sales are. And there was a lot of people in there, some of which have risen to very high levels in the entertainment industry. And they were like mildly interested. And I said, well, Lion King is selling this and different movies that they had out there in home entertainment. And then I asked them what their number one competitor was, and they said Warner Brothers without hesitation. So I pushed a button and I showed them what Warner Brothers was doing, and they couldn't believe that I could show this. Like, but that's our competitor. I'm like, Walmart won't give us this information. I said, they won't, but we're a third-party provider. And so I said, I can do that. I said, what else do you want to know? What about Fox or, and that sort of thing? And the head of research got up in the middle of my presentation and said, nobody leave the room. And she walked out and she came back and she said, we'll take it. And I said, well, I haven't told you the price, A, and B, it's not built yet. Yeah. I'm just showing you a little tiny thing. And she said, she called my boss and said, if Mike builds it and he can get it up in 6 months, we'll buy all 7 site licenses. And basically no other studio could get it because they purchased all those, which was approved. And so I built it. And it was called Video Scan, and that was the beginning of Nielsen Entertainment.
Was that when we were in the NBA?
Yes,
because I remember you were like me. Like I was working full time and going to the NBA, but I was trying to build airplanes at Boeing. But I remember like you trying to do a lot of stuff at that time.
Yeah, and there was a lot of pressure because this was a whole new industry for us to go into. Mm-hmm. Now the Nielsen TV ratings is what everybody knows about. That was started way before I was born by A.C. Nielsen. But that had been spun off because it had data issues. And so with the money off of Video Scan, they were able to start Nielsen Entertainment, buy the TV ratings back. Then they bought a source for theatrical revenue. They do a tracking service for streaming as well, and put that all together as Nielsen Entertainment. It's known by a bunch of different names. Grace Note and the studio system and all that sort of thing. Oh. And it's basically the brains of Hollywood. And so there's 70,000 movies in it, and it has daily store-level sales for all 70,000 films for 72 countries around the world. Wow. It has screen-level data by hour, by screen, by building, by exhibitor or theater chain, by country for, I don't know, I'm not up to exactly what the number of countries it's in, everything they can get.
For people outside of consumer products and maybe entertainment, a lot of times it's hard to tell the value of the investment of $1. But with all that data that you're talking about to run one ad for a movie in a certain market based on that, you could query 2 or 3 days before, 2 or 3 days after, and really see if there was an impact of that dollar of advertising being spent.
Right. And you can do that stuff, and the studios do, because I did that for them. But much bigger is greenlighting to begin with. Because so basically, if you had a movie and you were pitching it to me and I was a studio executive, you would say, I have this movie, and it's like a cross between, I'll be funny for a second, Gone with the Wind, Star Wars 4, and Blair Witch. Obviously, there's no movie that blends those together as far as I know. But if that were it, I would go into that system, pull all the financial data, production costs, marketing costs, and then all the revenue. And then I would blend it together and build a financial model and do a range of how much that film would do in revenue across what they call windows: theatrical, video, television, streaming, and that kind of stuff.
Wow.
And then they use that to determine whether they're going to greenlight. There's a whole finance departments, many of them, at every studio, big ones, that do this all day long because people are pitching them movies. And so they've got to determine if they're going to make any money. And there are a lot of people in the entertainment industry, going on a side note, that are very creative, like, yeah, I don't care if it makes any money. That's a huge mistake, because what they don't realize, if it made no money, that means nobody saw it.
That's right.
So eyeballs equal dollars. And so they want, the studios want to make money, but they also want people to see the film. And so if only 10,000 people are going to watch it, they'll say, well, we can make it, but you need to make it on a, $10,000 budget or something like that, not $100 million or whatever it is.
Right.
So they'll adjust the budgets, based on it, or change the casting because this particular actor or actress or director can't bring in enough money to be able to offset the costs of the film.
So is that so at this point, you've been able to do all this work within really Nielsen and all of that. What other steps did you have before you started the Becket Fund?
Well, so I did this at Nielsen and I implemented at Disney. They had an exclusivity for about 3.5 years. Then they released 6 of the 7 site licenses and I sold it to Warner Brothers the next morning, Universal that afternoon, and basically went through Hollywood and Sony. And because everybody knew they had to have it because they were operating blind. They were just throwing movies out there in home entertainment and hoping that they were going to sell. But Disney knew exactly what was going on, what price points worked, what, box sets were selling. We even do analysis on box art. Like if the backgrounds were white versus black, where does it sit on the, on the shelves? We did all kinds of analysis and that sort of thing. And so about then we were finishing our MBA and I decided, well, I like this entertainment thing. So I switched to entertainment. So I have an MBA in entertainment from USC, which last I saw was #1 in the world. And that helped.
Yeah. And so when you shift into like full entertainment, and again, because I'm trying to get to the point, was your main endeavor was that Becket at that point, or was, because I know you do consulting too for a lot of different projects, and a lot of my friends that I have in Hollywood, some of them work as executives at the top of firm, at the top of the different entertainment companies, but so they're not doing a bunch of side stuff. But I think you definitely have your fingers in a lot of stuff.
I do. There was a step in between because when I graduated, I decided I didn't want to work at Nielsen anymore. And so I put my resume out and several studios, made offers to me and Sony Pictures made the best offer. So I became executive director of worldwide sales planning and research and forecasting. Again, the same function I did in real estate and CPG, and at Nielsen really. And now I'm doing it for the studio. So I was there for 5.5 years. During that time, there was a lawsuit over Spider-Man, and without going into the technicalities of it, Sony won the lawsuit, but they needed somebody to forecast and project what the value of the Spider-Man franchise was from, theatrical release or movie based. And so that's what I did is I went through and looked at all the stuff and submitted that to the court and it was approved. And based on that value, Sony wrote a check to Marvel and some other studios that had their hands in this sort of thing. So when you see Spider-Man, it comes out under the Sony banner, even though Disney bought the whole Marvel catalog.
Oh, wow.
And so it still remains there, and it's probably their biggest asset at this point in time. But people weren't willing to settle the lawsuit until they could see what the value was. And so they needed something, and the system that I built was what we used to do that.
Wow.
And then we bought MGM. MGM no longer belongs to Sony. Amazon, most people know Amazon bought MGM. But at the time, we wanted to do that. So they came to me and said, okay, what's the value of the MGM catalog? And so I looked at James Bond and all these things and said, well, what's the value of all these things in home entertainment? And I put a projection together. And then the theatrical research woman, she put that theatrical projection together for those sorts of things, which was much smaller, right? Because it'd just be prequels and sequels off of those intellectual property that already existed. And I did that for a while. And then I left there. It sounds like a very strong right turn, but then I worked for British Petroleum. But I did the same kind of thing, demographic projections, PR, and all that stuff for the British Petroleum's brand on the West Coast, which is ARCO and AMPM. And so I did movie tie-ins and marketing research and sales forecasting and projections. Again, the same thing, using Nielsen data. And I became a client of Nielsen's again, doing that. And then I went out on my own. And that's when I decided to help independent filmmakers and start the fund.
Wow. Yeah, so let's spend a couple minutes on the fund itself. From your perspective, just an overall view of like the objective of what you're trying to accomplish, and you've got a really great executive team and board, and the objectives, and probably part of the reason you were in Cannes is to do some of that work too. So if you wouldn't mind.
Right. So from my perspective, when you work for some other company and you build something for them, right or wrong, they own it. Mm-hmm. So when I conceptualized the Cheez-It Hot and Spicy 20 years ago or so, I got a $500 bonus. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing they've probably netted a few $1 billion in net profit over the last 20 or 25 years. Mm-hmm. And Nielsen the same way. I got a $1,000 bonus. Mm-hmm. And then when I helped with the Spider-Man, my boss got a new Range Rover, and I didn't get a lunch. So I look at this and I'm like, okay, I get it. I'm working for somebody else. They own what I do, but I wanted to do something for myself. Right. And also I saw an opportunity. Lots of people in lots of industries talk about putting women and minorities and underrepresented people in positions of power. And all the studies show that if on a board of directors, for example, you have a diverse group of people, you get better ideas that make more money. Those companies actually, I saw an analysis that was done, they make more money. And that's the key. So lots of people in Hollywood say, hey, we're going to put, women in director roles or writer roles. It's only 2%. Last I saw, it's a really, really low number of all the films that get distributed in theaters. 2% are written by women and 2% are directed by women. It's really small. But I suspected that you could make more money by putting women in these roles and minorities on screen and above the line talent. So using the same system, I downloaded hundreds of movies over a whole bunch of years, and I analyzed the ROI based on the ethnicity and gender of the writer, the ethnicity and gender of the director, and the percentage of underrepresented people in above the line talent, meaning actors, basically. Sure. And it turns out there was. And so statistically significant difference, 31.25% higher gross revenue on a worldwide basis if women and minorities are put in positions where their influence shows up on screen. So a writer, their words are being said. A director, their vision, and of course the actors are obvious. And so there's a very specific way this works. It doesn't work with animation projects. I suspect this sort of analysis, you don't know the why, you just know the what, because it's not a real human on the screen. It's an animated. But most genres it works. And so with that, I created something on my own where I can go out and I can help other people. So I think, I call it a hat trick, to use a hockey term. The actors and the writers and the directors that are women and minorities are helped because they're employed more. The studios and the investors and all those sorts of people helped because without spending any more money, just by replacing an actor or hiring a female director, they make more money. So it doesn't cost them anymore, but the revenue goes up. And then I think society has helped because then you see on screen people of color and minorities, and familiarity actually lowers prejudice. People tend to be more prejudiced for groups they don't know about. They don't know anybody themselves that is this type of person. And so I think everybody's helped by this.
So once you get the fund up and going, talk about how you started this. Like, you had this idea, you were able to kind of get some pretty high level people to be focused on that. So was this something that you started 3 years before and then all of a sudden it pops up on the screen? So it took a while to have its coming out party, or is it something like it happened fairly quickly and next thing you know is, hey, we've got a project, I've got people interested, you're just tying everything together and the thing was out and, established in a very short amount of time. Which side was that?
It was a long slog because I had a concept, but I didn't know what the secret sauce was. So I had to buy all that data. I had to analyze all that data. and then had to figure out what that special sauce was because it's very complicated because you've got hundreds of thousands of data points and trying to manipulate that to look at it in different ways. Once I discovered that there was a benefit to putting women and minorities, then I said, okay, so what do I want to do with this information? So I could try to sell it to a studio and just be a consultant, but I wanted to run the company myself. So then I went out into Hollywood to friends and whatnot and asked, hey, would you be interested in participating in this? And I did get some high-level people, most of which had to get carve-outs from their contracts at the studios because they really can't help other companies while they're working at a studio. But the studios were all very supportive, and they thought, this is something that will help because I'm not competing with them. I'm helping independent films get financed that make more money, and the studios need those films to distribute because they can't live off the Spider-Mans and the Harry Potters of the world. They make a lot of money, but they're releasing a movie every week. They've got to have. They're not producing all those, right? So they need these independent. So they liked it, and so they were able to do that. And so I got people on board that have areas of expertise where I don't so much. Like one of the people was the head of merchandising at MGM and Sony. So that's hats and keychains and beds and dolls and all that kind of stuff. She's an expert in that sort of thing, and she can figure out what that is and source the product and for these films. So with all those people in place, then I need it sort of goes into what we talked about earlier is the triple conundrum. So for a film to get made, you need three things. You need money, talent, and distribution. And if you get any one of those three, the other two will come pretty easily. So if all of a sudden Tom Cruise signs on the dotted line and says, I'm going to be in Mike's movie, I'll walk in the front door of Paramount and say, I have Tom Cruise. And what do you want? I said, well, I want distribution, and they'll probably give money to, want to fund it. If on the other hand, I walk in the front door of Paramount and say, hey, I have this movie, and they'll say, we'll guarantee distribution. Then I walk in the front door at an agency and say, I want Tom Cruise. And they'll say, of course, you got worldwide distribution from Paramount. You've got him. And then people will just call me up and offer money. Or if I get money, then I can go in the front door of CAA and ask for Reese Witherspoon and say, here's, $10 million in cash. Will you be in my movie? Assuming the script is good, she'll say yes. Then I go to Paramount and say, I've got Reese Witherspoon in a movie. And they'll say, what do you want? And I'm like, worldwide distribution. Boom, you got it.
Wow.
And so it works. So all you need is one of those three. The problem is that nobody wants to go unless somebody else already has. So everybody says no until you get one to say yes. But it's very difficult to break that triple conundrum. You just have to break one of them, but it's hard. If I go into Paramount and I don't have any money and I don't have any talent, they're like, so we're not giving you anything is the answer then, right? If I have money, if I'm trying to get money, they'll say, well, how am I going to make my money back, which is distribution, and who's going to be in it? I'm like, well, I don't want, no. And I will come back when you do.
Right.
So everybody says no until one says yes. And so that's the triple conundrum.
So in the triple conundrum, from the coordination point, this is the environment that you operate. Which
all producers operate. This is what they do.
What do you think is the hardest of the three?
I would answer the question another way. For independent filmmakers, it's almost always money because agents don't want to put their talent. I mean, people like Spielberg, they have those things. I have all three of those things to begin with. But for the average independent filmmaker, I didn't understand why agents and managers wouldn't say, hey, put their client in a movie or, put something together, some contract or whatever. Because they know what we're going to, as producers, what we're going to do. And the answer is we're going to put it in our business plan, and we're going to go around Hollywood shopping this movie around with Reese Witherspoon in it.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't get financed, it looks bad on Reese, not me. Like, oh my gosh, Reese can't get a movie made? Obviously, that's not true. I'm making it up and putting her there because that would never happen with her. But see, so they won't trust an independent filmmaker with their talent and potentially harming their relationship. And the studios, if you're not prolific, they're not going to know what kind of movie they're going to end up with. So they're not going to guarantee distribution like, it's a box. They don't know what's inside the box because you've not produced enough movies potentially. So they won't give you distribution.
So outside of the triple conundrum, like there's the creative process process that creates scripts, maybe even off of books. A lot of people that, we're here in LA. So, we probably always know people that have written a book or a script wanting it to be a movie. When what you're talking about is something that kind of made it through that Marauder potentially. Any perspective though that you have, like for people that do look at that part of the industry as the funnel of creation, kind of because I know you and I've talked, so I'm kind of leading you a little bit, but I know you've had some experiences and kind of engaging with people and helping mentor and coach, but I think it would be interesting for the audience.
Yeah. So yes, I skipped over that part, and it's critical because without a good script, the triple conundrum doesn't even exist because you can't, you can't make anything go without a good script. That's the foundation. Sort of like the plans for a house. You wouldn't build a new house with no blueprints, right? And the script's actually even more important than that. But a lot of people write scripts, and one of the mistakes that I think people say a lot is, well, I'm going to do something completely different. I'm like, okay, you don't even know what the rules are yet. And you're trying to break rules that you don't know what they are or why they exist. And so I would say there are several books out there that are very good that tell you how to write a screenplay. And I don't have this stuff memorized, but on page 17, you need to have met all the characters. On page 32, you need to know who the main character is and what their issue is. On page 53, that issue seems to be resolved, but it causes a different issue or whatever.
So the formula.
There's a formula, and people say, I don't want to follow a formula. I'm like, they look at it backwards. They think that somebody created this formula and is forcing people to use it, but it's not that way at all. It's the people who looked at all the great screenplays that have made money, that have won awards. What do they have in common? And they put it down for you to use. So don't come in and say, well, I'm going to do something that, the greatest screenwriters in the history of the world have never done. And I'm the smartest one that's ever, it's just like, you could be, but play the lottery. You've got a better chance of making that happen. But go to professionals. You think you have a good idea, put an outline together, and then go to somebody who works at an agency who evaluates screenplays and plot lines. And there's people at USC that have master's degree in screenwriting and all. There's a lot of people out there. They charge a couple $100 to evaluate these things. I think if it's your dream, get a professional to evaluate it,
So outside of the Becket Fund and kind of the mentoring that you do, any other parts of the entertainment business that you'd want to talk about? That, because like I said, I know you have your hand in a lot of different areas. And even when you went to the Cannes, I know that you were probably doing 3 or 4 different aspects of the business there. But just to kind of give a holistic picture of your background and kind of where you're at.
Yeah, I guess I would say my advice is the entertainment industry is very complex. It is not, people say, oh, well, you write a script, you make it, and then you put it in a screen. It doesn't really, there are 1,000 steps in the middle of all that stuff, and it is really not very easy at all. I believe the WGA, which is the Writers Guild of America, of professional screenwriters, I saw a percent once of the screenplays that are submitted to them by professional screenwriters, meaning they've already had something made and put onto a screen to get into the WGA, only 0.3% of their screenplays ever make it onto any screen. Oh. So if you're not in the WGA, you never had anything made, your number is less than that. And so get professional advice, have people review it. And then the other mistake I think people make is they feel like this one is going to be is going to change their life and they're going to buy a mansion in the Hollywood Hills and live off it. It doesn't really work that way. WGA has rules about how the writers are being paid and that kind of stuff. But movies don't tend to start making money until year 3, right? If they ever do, most films don't make any money because the marketing costs are so high. So if I remember correctly, the first Spider-Man I worked on, the Tobey Maguire, was $208 to produce and $250 million to market. Wow. So it's more expensive to market than it is to make. And so you've got to pay all these people back that have invested in the movie, plus distribution fees, because the studios make money because they get your movie into the theaters. Then the producers and the writers and the directors and the actors start making profits. And most movies never make it to that. So you have to do it because you love it. And then over the years, you'll start building up a portfolio of films, and they call it mailbox money. Every quarter, you get a few checks in the mail from movies that you've done, and like, wow, here's an extra X amount of dollars. And that's, then you start living off of that over the course of the years. But I also help independent filmmakers outside of the film fund, and I build those financial plans just like I did for the studios, and they use those to go break the triple conundrum. So you can show it to investors, banks, agents, managers, talent, distributors, studios, and say, here's how much money you're going to make off my movie. And that encourages them to sign up and be a part of it. And so that increases the chances by about 100 times, just that one thing, having that extra when you go to pitch, rather than say, what producers call it is, I got pitched something. Well, what is it? Script on a table. Which means they've done no work. There are no cast suggestions. There's no budget. There's just a piece of paper on the table, and they expect the producer to do all this work to get it done. And realize the other thing that I see people, the creative types, do is they get really antsed up. Well, I don't want anybody to ruin my movie because this scene is so important. Everybody's in the same boat. We're all trying to have the film turn out well. And sometimes the business people say, look, this, your movie is $10 million. We can cut $2 million out by cutting this scene and just talking about it. Yes, you like it, but 20% of the budget goes away, much more likely to make money on it, right? So let the producers do their jobs and don't.
Do you see like all of the streaming platforms now that are out there, Netflix? There's a couple of books that you see that the book is out recently, and then all of a sudden, bam, it's a movie. J.D. Vance it did the movie on the Appalachian Mountains and him growing up as a young man, and then really sordid history of his family, but then ends up kind of fighting his way through and becoming, an attorney and now a U.S. senator. But I think that story, his book, he wasn't a guy that had wrote a lot of books, and then he writes a book and boom, it gets picked up. And I think Netflix does a series on, or at least, one season. And I think that type of thing spurs people to have the dream to continue to do stuff like that. And you probably see a lot of, like you said, setting that expectations back to the perfect storm or the perfect situation that happens. Those get talked about, but they don't talk about the thousands, that never make it that far.
Right. So the studios do things, and I put the Netflix in the studio world, right, even though their distribution method is somewhat different, although they bought theaters and they're putting their movies in theaters mainly to win Academy Awards. I think it's not probably making too much money, but they like the intellectual property, right? So a book comes out and it's popular. What that tells the studio or the producer, hey, people like this subject matter. They like the tone, lots of stuff about it. I think that if we turn this into a film, it will be financially successful. So that's the key. Again, so now you're talking about books and intellectual property. And also they look at it and say, well, I can make a feature film out of it. I can make a series out of it. I can do a feature film and then do a TV, animation, spin off of it. And then people like in merchandising said, well, could we sell hats and T-shirts and one of the things that makes Harry Potter so successful and Disney's animation project so successful is all the merchandise that's sold, hats and T-shirts and beds and, coolers and whatever. And those make a lot of money. And so they help, finance these movies and pay the people who've written, directed, acted in them. And so that intellectual property is very important. And so same thing for somebody doing a podcast that wants to be in movies. If you've got a following of 10 million people, the studio might look at you as a potential actor or somebody that would be in a series, even if it's a bit part, because you bring your whole audience into that. And that's super important because, again, that lowers the marketing costs. And then one of the things I hear people say, well, studios put up the same movies over and over and over again. Well, one of the reasons is they were financially successful. And one of the reasons they're more successful over time is you don't have to spend as much marketing, because I don't know what the budgets for the later Spider-Mans were, but once it's out, people know what he looks like and that kind of stuff. So you don't have to spend $250 million on marketing necessarily. Maybe you only spend $150 million on marketing rather than $250 million. So it becomes even more profitable over time because people know the intellectual property. So that's really the key in all this stuff, is the intellectual property. Whereas it's just a script, or a script based on a book, or a script based on real life, or whatever it is, where people know what it is. And so you don't have to spend as much money on marketing for it.
Your view on, I've been doing a lot of shows lately on AI and the potential impact in different industries. I've had some folks, I had actually a vice president of still photography for Sony was on one of my shows, and I asked her the question about AI, because, they do a lot of photography. That photography gets kind of put out there. Everybody today thinks they're expert, photographers because of the social media. But I was just kind of curious from your side, even down to writing scripts and the potential, upside or threat of AI. Any thoughts on that from your view of the film industry?
Yeah, I'm not sure how accurate this is, but the reality is AI doesn't create anything new in a script. You're feeding it, 10,000 scripts and say, write a movie about a shark. Well, it's going to look at Jaws, and it's going to look at this and the great white and all these different things, and then put it together in a new way. I think we would call that plagiarism, wouldn't we? And so maybe AI in some future can create something from scratch that isn't based on other things. On the other hand, if I'm sitting down and I'm writing a screenplay about sharks, I've seen Great White and I've seen Jaws. It is going to be influencing me. So that's a very difficult answer, to give, because I see both parts of it. Some are relatively easy. So if you wanted Elvis Presley in a movie and you wanted to remake those, AI could do that and have him act. But I would think that Elvis Presley's estate should get, pay for him even though he's not alive, acting in that.
His likeness.
It's a matter of compensation and credit for these people to do that. So if you do that with actors, why not writers too?
Right.
But then who do you pay? It's AI, and it's not necessarily telling you. I don't use AI, so I don't know. But where is it getting this information from? And plagiarism, is a legal matter. I'm not an attorney, but I believe that certain number of words in a row from some other document, is plagiarism.
Yeah, I know in universities they have ways of kind of tracking that down and being able to kind of find out when AI has gone rogue. Mike, as we kind of go through and potentially the closing of this, when you think of like the industry going forward, and you definitely, Becket is in a niche area that you're trying to go, but you're seeing the bigger picture industry. You kind of, zoom out a little bit. How do you see like the film industry for the next 5 to 10 years? Maybe trends on, is it still maintaining its place here in L.A.? Is it, and then the bigger picture, I guess, films in general and what you see based on, because you're a data guy.
Right. And so data drives a lot, and that's how you're more profitable, and meaning more profitable, more eyeballs get to see it, more eyeballs want to see whatever that is that you're putting out, whether it's television or series and all that sort of thing. The more affluent society becomes, the more entertainment is demanded. And entertainment, in a broad stroke, includes you know, college football, the NFL, the NHL, Major League Baseball. Some consider restaurants entertainment, right? Gaming, of course. Both online gaming and think about Las Vegas. I saw a picture of Las Vegas in the 1950s versus today. It's crazy different. But people want entertainment. They want to have pleasure and that sort of thing. And I think the world is getting more demanding of people and their time in a corporate sense or starting their own business. So they need the release. And there are a lot of countries in the world that aren't where the United States is. And so they're now coming into their own and starting to demand more entertainment, you know, a way to relax and that sort of thing. So movies I don't think, ever go away. I think having a 3D movie in your own home would be interesting without having to wear glasses, right? Where like a hologram, you know, where you could, where it would be acted out in front. I think that'll be really cool. I think, you know, inserting yourself into a film, I think that would be really interesting too, where you're interacting with somebody in a Streetcar Named Desire or something, and you're there and you're in the living room with, you know, Vivian Leigh and these people watching what's going on and immersive. I think that's a way it could go. These are, you know, I don't know that they're quite there yet with those sorts of things, but I think that would be fun. So it will evolve, you know, just like home entertainment. People say it's dead. It's not. I think last year it was $10 billion in revenue. So home entertainment is not dead. But streaming did take probably cut it in half over the last few years and that sort of thing.
It seems like theatrical is definitely coming back.
It is, because there is something unique about not being in your home with kids crying and dogs running around and the doorbell ringing and, you know, hopefully phones going off. You can go into a theater and have a completely different experience, you know, there. I think it's very important for comedies because, you know, if you were in a theater and people were laughing so hard they were falling, it's sort of contagious. So especially for comedies, it's important to be with groups of people. And so it becomes an interactive experience with other humans rather than just your family. And it's a way to get out of your home. And even though most people have big TVs and sound bars and stuff like that at home nowadays, here in the United States anyway, the theaters are important, but they have to provide something that is unique. So it can't just be, that's for the stadium seating, and now we've got ones that serve cocktails and food and, you know, and you can lounge, you know, recline and all, you know, that's the way to make a movie more pleasurable for people.
Let me ask you this, final question. So your background, very unique, very specialized. You know, you did a great job of kind of taking people through. At the beginning of the interview, somebody would have thought they were getting ready to hear from a data scientist that's in consumer products, retail, brand management, and we ended in film. People that might want or be interested in film and industry just in general, or a specialty. You said something early in the interview that I thought was really important, is you're not a functional person. You're a functional person. You're not the industry person.
Right.
Can you maybe close on that and give some career advice to people that are out there that hear this? Like somebody that have to follow your path, very specialized. You may go through that path and not end up in film. You could end up at at BP. You know, you could, but you did end up in film, and probably people that will watch this episode because they'll see your background will want to hear about film. So maybe with the film industry, like any career advice you would give?
I think with anything, you have to figure out what you have that somebody else wants, right? And, you know, what somebody else wants is really important. And so I happen to be providing something in home entertainment when it was growing at triple digits year over year. And it was a huge cash cow for most of the studios. And so I happen to have the skills to be able to help with the forecasting and marketing research and demographics and all that stuff at a time when home entertainment was going through the roof. And so I'd say if you're a career person, if you're an industry person, I equate that to what are you interested in? Cars, movies, music, real estate, you know, AI, furniture, lights, cameras, microphones. Are you passionate about a subject matter, or Are you more passionate about, I'm really good with numbers, I'm really good with solving problems, I'm really good in operations, I'm really good in logistics, I'm really good in marketing and create. So those sorts of things, those are two different things, and I put them on an XY axis. I created this for myself. I built a spreadsheet and I said, well, what am I good at doing? I'm good at, and I put those across the top. Numbers, research, logistics, calculations, all the stuff. And then down the left-hand side, what am I interested in? Food, music, cars, real estate. Out of those 4, I've done 3 of them, but always on the same vertical, and always on the same function. And that's what I'm good at doing. And so that's more important, that I can provide something to these industries that they might not have, or they do have, but they need more people to do it. And so I'd say, look at yourself and say, is it more important to be in entertainment, or is it more important that I'm doing finance, and entertainment's most interesting to me, so I'm going to try that. But if I can do finance with automotive industry, I'm also happy because I'm providing something and I love finance. And I think you have to know yourself well enough to know which one you are, and then you plunge into that. But the intersection of entertainment and finance is very interesting. So I'm doing lots of stuff. So now I look like I'm an industry person, but I'm really a function guy.
Well, we let the secret out.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, I really, really enjoyed getting back together. And I know after the travels that you've had over the last 2 weeks, really huge level of appreciation for you to come in and catch up. And it's been really nice to get caught up. It's been a couple of years for us.
Yeah, it has. Very nice. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So thank you again for being on the show. And I know tonight you're going to be going to some big dinners tonight. We talked about off mic. I wish you the best, and we'll stay in touch. Thank you.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Thanks again for joining me today on the Ameritocracy Show. Be sure to follow me on social media and our website at troyedgar.com, where you can get more information and sign up for my weekly email. I hope you have a great week.